Max's Kansas City, that whole 70s post factory kind of world in New York City is, for a lot of people, including myself, almost like a fantasy world where it seemed like everything was exciting, creativity was at a high, everyone was encouraging to each other. Jealousy didn't exist maybe, it was just about, let's just push everyone forward and let's be original because we're in New York. So what is your take on that era, because you were there as a kid?
Well, first of all, I have to immediately throw in that my mom used to hang out at the factory and was a big part of that whole scene. And, you know, people always ask me, how did I wind up at clubs and going to shows so young? Because obviously, you know, anybody who knows who I am has seen the pictures. I'm like 10, 11, 12, and I'm at all these places that really no child should ever have been anywhere near. But that's kind of how, ultimately, how I wound up involved with all those places, is because, you know, my mom was a part of that scene. She's actually the reason that Andy Warhol wound up seeing the Velvet Underground. And, you know, she was friends with a lot of pretty influential and heavy people of the time, you know. And my folks met at a Harry Smith party at the Chelsea Hotel. So it's like, you know, I've pretty much been, you know, I was conceived into it, literally.
Were there any other kids? Any peers that you could relate to at all, or?
Hell no.
The closest were the 20-year-olds and 20
There was one kid who was a few years older than me. Well, like the Blessed were only a few years older than me. Howie Pyro, I don't know how many years older than me he was, like maybe 4 or 5 years. And, you know, that's a big deal when you're 12. But like there was like one other kid who was, again, like 3 or 4 years older than me. So he was like 16 or whatever the fuck. And I remember he used to be the cool kid on scene, and he was kind of annoyed when I all of a sudden was younger and in a band, and so I was a little cooler, you know. So it's like we didn't even make friends really. He kind of, you know, I hung out with all adults, man. And it was like weird because, you know, I mean, I was like the only kid in class who would miss school because I had gigs on the weekend. You know, to other kids in 5th grade and shit, you know. What do you mean you had a concert at a club? Like, it was like alien. And I remember I actually went to school with Huey Morgan from the Fun Loving Criminals, and I remember him being like, you know, what are you talking about? You did a show, you know? And years later, he's telling me, man, I always thought that shit was so crazy. Like, you were out doing shows, and we're like, what the fuck? You know? I mean, you know, I got a fucking real, I got a lot of baggage because of that shit, man. I don't, as much as people try to romanticize it, you know, I'm really glad I had the majority of the experiences I had and witnessed the things I saw, but I wouldn't fucking put any kid in any of those environments or around any of those fucking scumbags. I mean, everybody was like a fucking, with the exception of very few people, everybody was completely fucking fucked up. A lot of shit happened to me that, you know, wasn't exactly cool. And, you know, so by the time I came to my early teens, I was a fucking mess. And you could ask anybody in the New York hardcore days, I was probably one of the scariest motherfuckers you'd ever meet. You know, all those early hardcore kids were fucking scared shitless of me because I was living a really crazy life, like before they fucking knew what the fuck was going on. And I grew up in an all Puerto Rican neighborhood where I used to have to fucking fight breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So by the time all these fucking hardcore kids start coming in from Queens and the suburbs of Connecticut or wherever the fuck they were coming from, I was a fucking terrifying motherfucker then because, you know, not only would I fuck them up, you know, but, you know.
How much did you...
I don't want to say I was realer, but I was realer.
How much did you lean into that, and how much did you love that? The image of you, this idea of you.
I didn't love anything. It's just who the fuck I was. I didn't have that same perception of me that other people have of me. I'm just me. And you look at me fucking wrong or look at me too long, and I'm going to fucking fuck you up. And everybody knew it. Even my friends, you know? So again,
You don't feel bad about your friends feeling that way?
I fucking can't help that. I mean, it's a little odd in hindsight now. I didn't know it till years later, till they had the courage to fucking tell me.
That goes back to people looking out for you and being honest with you and trying to steer you in a direction. Everyone was just out for themselves.
Well, I think the hardcore kids were, at that point in time, most of them, again, they were like, who the fuck was going to tell me some shit like that? Ain't nobody had the fucking, wasn't nobody going to tell me shit. And in the early days of those punk days and shit, yeah, man, everybody was kind of lost in the sauce, And then sadly what happened is you wound up having a lot of these fucking, wannabes who started like trying to emulate all the things about how I was expressing myself, which were not cool necessarily. I mean, like I said, I was a pretty violent person in my youth, and that caused a lot of kids on the scene to like form their own little groups that tried to impose their fear and violence on others and shit. And it really kind of, I have more regrets about that shit, being a fucking, I understand why I was a maniac when I was young. I completely understand. I've had to, go to therapy and shit over it. I get it. Doesn't make me feel good about it, but, it is what it is. But it's like, when you are kind of the cause for a lot of other people's behavior. I mean, but at the end of the day, everybody's got to own their own shit. You can't say, oh, I did this because such and such was an influence on me. Well, no, motherfucker, you did it because you did it. Whether you were influenced by them or not, you got to fucking be responsible for your shit. So, But I tell you this about Max's, because we were talking about Max's. Well, I always kind of liked Max's better than CB's in those early days. I got to tell you.
Yeah.
And I grew to love CB's more. But in the early days, first of all, CB's was on the Bowery. So it was just fucking scummy as fuck down there. It was like the fucking, it was literally Skid Row. You had to walk from fucking, like many, many, many blocks of just bums and junkies and total scumbags. And then they had the halfway house right next door. So there was always a fucking army of fucking derelicts right in front. I mean, that just gives you an idea of what that fucking block was like. Whereas Max's was above 14th Street. It was like, and that was kind of the first border. Like above 14th Street, things started to get a little nicer. And I think it was around 20th or 21st Street or some shit like that, right by Union Square Park, which was like a major drug park at the time. But again, it was further up, so it wasn't nearly as fucking scummy as it was further down where I lived or where CB's was. And also, Max's paid better. And it's funny because of course, I didn't realize, then that, they were doing all the, manufacturing of the money themselves. But, you always knew Max's, there was some gangster shit going on. There was definitely always some mafia shit there. That was obvious. And, but it was, CB's was like a fucking rundown fucking kind of shithole. Even when it had the movie seats all the way up to the stage, it was still a rundown shithole in a fucking rundown area. Max's had the restaurant downstairs. It had the staircase that led up to the club where the bands played. So it was like more of a,
What are some shows that stand out from Max's that you saw? Because you probably saw some legendary bands.
Oh, man, I saw so many fucking things there that were just ridiculous. But I mean, and also people should know that, fucking everybody played there. I mean, fuck punk rock and hardcore or whatever. Well, hardcore wasn't even a thing yet, but like, fucking Bob Marley and the Wailers played there, opening up for fucking like Bruce Springsteen or some shit. like literally every artist you can think of. I think AC/DC fucking played there or some shit. I don't know, but like Lemmy wanted Motorhead to play there, but they never got a chance. But it was just like, but I gotta say, it was, besides playing there with the Stimulators, which meant a lot to me, I think the thing that stood out the most was seeing the Bad Brains there. People were still playing punk rock. It was still like, they were like, I was like, whoa, fucking here comes the train, motherfucker, get out of the way, you about to get run the fuck down. This motherfucker doing backflips and shit. We're like, what?
Was Earl influence on
Are you
Because
crazy?
you played
Shit.
drums.
Was fire and influence on food, you know?
For those who don't know, Harley played drums.
Yeah, that's how that's, kind of why I play bass the way I play. And I'm still a drummer. I play drums on bass now. That's all. That's why I'm more like punchy than a lot of, I'm more like, and I really got that shit from Daryl too. Like Daryl was one of the people that, is one of the reasons why I ultimately wound up switching from drums to bass. And, but yeah, I gotta say that the Bad Brains were one of them.
Did you talk to him about bass or anyone else about bass?
He gave me the only real bass lessons. Him and Lemmy, the only two people that I ever got any actual lessons from. And I didn't get like many lessons, but like Daryl, I used to hang and jam with Daryl like all the time. Sometimes I'd be playing drums and he'd be playing bass at me and explaining stuff to me while he'd be playing it. And yeah, I have some great memories of that, man. Yeah.
So you had some musical kind of role models or people that were looking at
Oh, yeah. No, the Bad Brains probably are the only people that if I could look back that had some sort of positive influence. I mean, obviously my aunt did too. She taught me a lot about music and really taught me how to be a band leader, and
And Lemmy.
Lemmy gave me the only other real bass lesson I ever had, and he was definitely a huge influence on me, not just as a musician, but as a person. I was lucky enough to do a lot of shows with Motorhead over the years. I saw their first New York show ever at Irving Plaza with Daryl. And yeah, man, he was a huge influence on me. And one thing he said to me, I quote this one all the time. I was getting a little frustrated for a while, as all musicians do on tour, and just dealing with the life and the fans and this and that. And I'm just like, how the fuck do you deal with this shit, man? You've been doing this shit longer than fucking anybody. Here I'm like in my teens. I'm like, how the fuck you deal with this shit after all these years, all this bullshit? And by the time he looks at me, and he knew I was a vegetarian, ironically. So he said, what'd you rather be doing, slicing bacon for a living? And I was like, yeah, man. And what I took from that, it was like, would you rather be doing something you really hate? Something that's just like morally like unacceptable, or just something that's like really sucks? Like, suck it up, motherfucker.
But when I think of Lemmy, when I think of Lemmy and you, I can't picture either of you doing something normal, regular, boring job.
No,
either you're going to be a lifer or you're not going to.
Yeah, I would have been a fucking arch criminal if not music wasn't my path, because
So music saved your life.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say, But then again, there's a lot of successful arch criminals. I mean, just look at all the politicians out there. So, but music definitely, it was a curse, but it was a blessing, because it gave me a method to survive, even when I was, because my musical journey started so young, that even when I left New York and hitchhiked out to California the first time in like 1981 or 2, like I still had a little bit of juju from being already an established musician. So I was always able to find people who either knew who I was or knew of me or this or that. So a lot of times when I had nothing, I still had that. And, there was a lot of times I had nothing. I mean, I get quite emotional about it, still. I mean, today I had a moment where I was just like overwhelmed, like almost to tears, where I was just like, man, with like all the shit that I've been through, just like all the fucking times that I've hit rock bottom, like I'm just so fucking lucky and so blessed to be where I am in my life now. And, it never falls short on me. I remember times when I literally didn't have like not a dollar in my pocket and wasn't even sure where I was going to be or how I was going to survive. And I was just like fucked up on all kinds of fucking drugs and just fucked up by life. And again, traumatized from all that childhood rock and roll bullshit, because what might have been cool for all those adults was not cool. This is not how you raise a child, to like push the envelope with no give a fuck about anything other than just like, the self-indulgence and self-destruction and no hopes or plans for the future. You know, that's pretty much what I was fed.
You were living day to day.
Absolutely. And, you know, still, even with, you know, my wife and my life in order, I still kind of live day to day, even though I don't, but I kind of do. Like, that's how I feel inside. Like, even though I have things on the calendar and things that she gets me to, things that, you know, I still feel kind of like I'm sort of just like floating a little bit. And I just think that that's kind of, you know, results of the trauma, you know.
How aware
results
were you?
Of punk rock.
So the time period from I was born in 75, so too young to obviously have been around that Blondie and all that stuff, stimulators, but it was, I tell people that the 80s for me in New York City was cool because we had the hardcore stuff happening, we had rap music developing.
Yeah.
How aware were you of the rap scene
very
and
much.
all that? And
absolutely. I mean, you couldn't be a New York kid without being aware of what was happening around you. I mean, I remember before rap even really happened, because you know, before there was even such a thing as b-boys and breakdancing, all the gang bangers, they used to up-rock, which was like the pre-breakdancing thing. It was like similar, but they hadn't started doing all the floor stuff yet, and they weren't throwing cardboard down. It was just like kind of like moves and and you'd see all the dudes up-rocking on the corner, and like, this is before hip-hop. This is kind of when I think it's really funny that Kraftwerk is actually the origin of all of that shit, because they all used to up-rock to fucking Trans-Euro Express. So I used to like be in my apartment listening to Trans-Euro Express getting blasted all fucking night long while these fuckers were out there smoking dust and fucking bugging out on the corner. And these guys were no joke. This gang on my block was called the Hitmen, and they were actual hitmen. And they sold the smack on my block. A few years later, one of them, they had a hit on me. I had to leave town for a minute, but that's another story. But so that song, Trans-Euro Express, then Africa Bambaataa took it and flipped it around and did, I guess it was called Soul Sonic Force. Yeah, so that's the same fucking song. And that people always...
Planet Rock.
Planet Rock, yes, thank you. People always say that Planet Rock was one of the first hip-hop songs. But all they did was fucking rap over fucking... Kraftwerk. So it's funny that if you really go back, hip-hop was kind of... So hip-hop was started by these fucking nerdy Germans. Who the fuck knew, you know? But really, if you want to break it down, that's where that shit... And then, of course, when the Sugar Hill Gang and all that stuff, I remember, you know, Adam Yauch and, you know, John Berry, the early singer. Adam was the first one to really discover all that shit. And I remember being with him in his house, and he'd be like jumping up and down on the bed, you know, doing fucking Sugar Hill, Sugar. And I'm like, this motherfucker. I'd be like rolling around on the floor laughing. He was so fucking funny.
70s New York City, 80s New York City. Musically, culturally, excitement-wise, what was... I mean, you're older, obviously, in the 80s, so maybe it's a different experience, but how do you compare them?
70s, Bee Gees, discos, my aunt, Jeannie, moving the couch over, practicing their moves for the dance club, for the dance contest, punk rock, 80s, hardcore, hip-hop. For me, a lot more street violence, and, you know, 80s again was like, it might just have been because I was coming of age. So, you know, I was becoming the terror that I became, you know. So that's funny because, like, growing up down there, I remember being like, when I was little, it was kind of scary. But then when I hit my early teens, it became like my playground, because I wasn't scared anymore, and I was the one you had to look out for, you know.
Can I tell you that I remember being a kid, probably 14, 15, maybe even younger, and seeing you come up from the train in Elmhurst.
Huh.
Because
well, where my grandparents
she must have lived by the mall.
Yeah, exactly.
By the mall, right. So
right behind White Castle.
We saw you. Yes, we saw you Queens Boulevard. By the Elmwood Theater.
Yeah.
We saw you a couple of times, And for us, it was like seeing a rock star. and it was like, but you know what was, the reason I bring this up is because we were intimidated to say anything to you.
Didn't I say that shit?
You had the chest piece, or like people didn't have tattoos back then everywhere.
Yeah,
It was only criminals and people maybe in bands, right?
Well, because they were illegal back then. You had to be a criminal to even know where the fuck to get a tattoo.
I forgot about that, yeah.
So if you knew where to get a tattoo, you were already in the circle of, criminality.
But I mean, the first time my friend Rob Savage goes, I think that's the guy from the Cro-Mags. I'm like, nah, why would he be here? He has to be in the Lower East Side fighting people. And then I was like, no, that's him. And then the second time he saw you, almost went up to you, but we left you alone. It didn't punish you. But it was, nowadays you see people walking around New York City, Queens, Brooklyn, wherever, especially Brooklyn, and you don't even... people covered in tattoos.
Yeah,
it's no big deal.
Yeah. It almost makes me wish I didn't have any. I'd be the different one.
Right.
But you know what? You can tell the difference, man. When somebody's got some real nice, super clean, super beautiful shit, they're a poser. When they got some ugly shit that you can't fucking barely see what it is, they're legit because they're old school. Like, everybody's always telling me, you think about you getting your shit touched up? I'm like, nah, man, this shit that's got history, man. This is how a tattoo on a bad motherfucker is supposed to look like. Not some like fancy, like, oh, where'd you get that work? Fuck out of here.
So there are people, since I'm always talking about hardcore with people of all ages, and there are people that are just getting into hardcore this year, and you have to go back to the beginning and listen to Cro-Mags, AF, and so on and so forth. There are people to this day that swear the Cro-Mags demo is better than the actual album. And how do you feel about that?
I'm one of those people. Honestly, there was so many fucking things wrong with the session when we did the album, Age of Quarrel, that's all I hear. I think I've only listened to the album maybe twice since it came out in its entirety, because all I hear is the mistakes and the things in the production that I hate, and the things that I know could have been better. I thought the demo, it captured us more in the way that we sounded live at CB's in those early days. And I think the album, there was a lot of things wrong with it. First of all, I blew out my amp as soon as I plugged in and fucking started playing. So they were like, I was fucking, what am I gonna do? And they were like, look, we'll just go direct. We'll reamp it later, this and that. So I was like, we can fix your tracks, you can record it later. So I really kind of played played the songs half-heartedly. I played them with less enthusiasm than I normally would, because I thought I was gonna do the track over, and I was just like, I was kind of pissed. I was grumpy, and I think that came out in my playing. I didn't really play as nice as I normally did, or as I did on the demo. The demo was just like us,
Where did you record the demo? How long did it take? How much was it?
It only took us a few days. It was, oh shit, I have all this shit written down in my fucking book. You gotta fucking pull this one out of your ass. I don't walk around with this info.
But it was a low budget studio.
Actually, it was almost free, man, because Jerry Williams fucking was recording us, and we were like working on on his schedule whenever we could get in. I think was it High Five Studios? I can't fucking remember. Bro, you can't pull some question out of where were you on such and such date and such and such. I don't fucking know.
But it was very lo-fi.
Yeah.
And the album was recorded in actual
It was, but to be fair, when we did that album, it was also what would be considered lo-fi and also very raw, because we played the whole fucking album as if we were playing a show. We all played in the same room at the same time. John sang. He wound up doing his vocals over, but we executed the shit like we were doing a gig. We had been gigging, so we were tight. We just went in and fucking played. And I think it was actually one of the first times Mackie had ever set up a double kick set, which is why he had the double bass part on the bridge, and We Gotta Know, which was like, he only used it a couple times, but it kind of created a vibe. I was actually surprised when he set it up. I was like, you're gonna use both of them? And he's like, yeah. And then he actually wound up doing that a few times live when we played. Not often, but a few times. But just the fact that we didn't have a click track, you know, we didn't do any like going back and fixing this and that. Like, it was literally like we fucking played it. And then, you know, I think the lead might have been done separately. I don't recall, but and John fucking sang his vocals with us and then wound up overdubbing. So really that's about as raw as you can get. You know, you said, like, you know, you try to do a record like that, it would be almost innovative to be that primitive. You know. Well, first of all, you know, I've always been a musician. I can't actually think of a time that I wasn't. You know, I was playing music. I was in touring bands before the Stimulators. I was touring in punk rock bands in '77. You know, I played at like anarchist festivals and all kinds of crazy shit, right? But prior to that, I was playing in my school band in Denmark, which was like really an innovative school band because like it was kind of it was called the Free School, all right? And most of the staff were like hippies and shit. So the music and the art program were really, they're way cooler than most of the music and art programs. Like, we used to cover Santana songs and Kool and the Gang songs, and like, you didn't have to be fucking Jimi Hendrix. You didn't even have to be, you know, you just had to fucking play it with attitude.
You got to mean it.
Yeah, and it's funny. I think Miles Davis even said that it's not the notes you play, it's the attitude you play them with. And there was nothing that had more attitude than the fucking Sex Pistols' first album, or the Damned's first album, or the fucking Clash or the Dead Boys' first album. Especially when I'm living in Europe, and at the time, like, ABBA is the biggest shit going on, and all of a sudden you got fucking buddies, you know, and fucking can't fly, and it's like, what the fuck, you know? And that was it for me. And so I was already playing music. Then that shit happened, and I met these two French dudes who were into punk. And this just goes to show how fucking crazy my mom was. She let me go on tour with these motherfuckers.
How old were you?
10?
Wow.
You know, and I'm on tour with two fucking French dudes that, like, my family don't know from shit. You know, it wasn't a long tour, but it's like, yeah, sure, my son can go play these. Like, what the fuck are you saying? Bro, two motherfucking adults try to take my 10-year-old son and fuck off with them. Somebody's fucking... There's gonna be some fucking murders going on.
The news, yeah.
That shit's gonna be all kinds of other news. And meanwhile, it's just like, yeah, you know. So that was like, that group of records is what got me thinking about songwriting. And then I was writing songs, but still playing drums. And then when I was putting together the Cro-Mags, I was playing with several different people trying to put together, when I put together the Cro-Mags, I had the name in my head, and I was starting to conceptualize what I wanted it to sound like, but I was still playing drums.
What did you have in your mind? You said you came up with the concept.
Yeah, well, it was really sparked by that first wave of hardcore, because like the Stimulators was more punky and a little bit more, I don't want to say pop-y, but, you know, it leaned more towards like Generation X or some shit like that than it did towards like Sex Pistols.
It had hooks.
It had hooks, and it wasn't quite as nasty. You know, it wasn't like fucking cut yourself and kill your mom and spit in your face and blah. You know, it was a little bit more, had a little bit more musical elements to it, you know? And so like when I saw the Bad Brains, that really changed everything. That was just like, you know, and then, you know, Circle Jerks came to New York, and Black Flag came to New York, and like the DC bands, you know, what happened was Stimulators started going into DC and playing at the 930, and I became friends with like Ian and Henry and all the people on the scene there, and started seeing some of those bands, and that's when I was just like, oh, Stimulators is over. I'm on to the next. I gotta take what I'm feeling and what I'm hearing and create something new, because this is just not satisfying this is not an expression of what I'm feeling. You know, I had a whole different level of intensity in my life from growing up in that neighborhood where shit was fucking crazy. I mean, I can't even tell you how much just like rough shit I had to experience, just like being the only white kid on my block. I mean, you know, people always try to say that white people like own racism, but I gotta tell you, I didn't feel that way as a kid. You know, if you were white, you definitely got shit on a lot in the hood. That was just the way it was. And so I had a lot of that music. It just like, it spoke to me, just that the rage, the intensity, the fucking, and so
the
yeah,
DC bands,
the DC bands, the California bands,
the early
Bad Brains. No, the early New York shit wasn't an influence on me for Cro-Mags. I didn't actually like any of the first generation of New York hardcore bands.
So you're not counting Bad Brains then?
No, they were from DC. They were not from, I don't give a fuck if they moved to New York. They were a DC band. So like DC and LA had a big influence on me. Honestly, none of the New York bands really did. I thought all of them were kind of mediocre because none of them had really good musicians. You know, every band, even the good bands, always had at least a shitty drummer or a shitty guitarist or a shitty bass player, which in my mind, I was a musician already. I had been playing my whole fucking life. So I'm going up there, and if they're sucking, I'm sorry, that's what I'm going to see. They're sucking. You know, I was like already like Buddy Rich. You know, I was like, yo, I'm fucking, you know.
You're the hardcore Buddy Rich.
Yeah, big time. Anybody who ever played with me will fucking tell you that shit.
So after a set, you yell at people, you fucked up on the third song. And
I have been known to do things like that. Yeah, I've been known to make a few grown men cry in my time. And Motorhead, see, that's another thing that was a big change for why Cro-Mags kind of changed the entire direction of the New York hardcore sound at that time. First of all, everybody was kind of an amateur. Let's just call it what it is. I don't give a fuck. I'm not trying to hurt any of your feelings, guys. I love you all. But nobody was really a fucking killer musician. And like I said, I'd already been playing, you know, so I knew what it fucking meant to be a musician, right? And then I started having influence like Motorhead and like Black Sabbath, you know. I remember first time I heard fucking Masters of Reality, I was like, whoa, you know. And then fucking I discovered Venom, their first single, and then the first album, and actually black metal. I was like, what? You know, and it was so good that I could overlook how they looked. You know, I was like, all right, these guys look like fucking idiots, but that shit is badass. All right, fuck all that devil bullshit, but that shit is badass. So
the musical content, you erased the lyrical content and the imagery. You just took the music.
It's kind of, yeah. So I'm just like in Discharge was another thing that I did that with, because instead of hearing like I wasn't listening to it and hearing like all peace punk lyrics, I was like, the blood runs red. That's the part I'm meditating on. I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm fucking, you know, and you gotta remember, man, I was like a fucking glue huffing, dust smoking, fuck you up type of motherfucker. So like you have that shit. Like I wanted the Cro-Mags to be like a skinhead version of Discharge, but then I wound up being the only skinhead in the band.
You don't listen, you said you've listened to Age of Quarrel twice?
Probably, yeah, maybe 3 times.
So I don't know if this applies, but if you think about this, at least you play some of the songs, so you think about the songs and that album, I
still like the songs.
Okay, good.
I just hate the album.
I mean, that's crazy, but okay.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I like the demo, but I actually prefer the album. Maybe it's because that's what I first heard.
Bro, you know what? I'm not going to shit on anybody for liking it, because I appreciate that. I just feel like it could have been a lot better, you know, if it was up to me.
But when you listen, or when you think about the songs, and does it take you back to that time period? It seems like I would stare at the picture of the band, which seemed like a motley crew. It was like, why is this guy in the band and this guy?
Paris?
They were just like, there's one guy who looks kind of like a b-boy, kind of. Then one guy, who's like skinhead, and then one guy, I don't know, he looks like short hair.
It was like I got nothing to say.
It was a mix of guys in the photo that was just like, you would stare at it and go, what the fuck is this about? How are these guys sound like this? And then the cover is, you know, now iconic with the nuclear. But when you think back to that period, do you feel like that's an accurate snapshot of where we were, or where I was mentally and musically?
Yeah. And actually, it's pretty funny because, well, it's not funny. It's It's interesting. Now, especially on these last few tours, because I've been touring a lot again, after doing a lot of the soul searching over the years and really thinking about my past and a lot of the shit that not only that I did, but a lot of shit that happened to me along the way, and just like all this shit, those lyrics were all real. I mean, I was writing about my life. Again, that's the difference to me between hardcore and metal at the time, was they're writing about the devil and about a bunch of bullshit. I'm writing about fighting in the streets and stealing food to fucking eat, because that's what my experience was. I had to steal to eat. I wasn't glorifying theft, but I was writing, it was like, this is what I'm doing. This is what happened to me. I could literally go through almost every song on that record and grab a piece out of any lyric and explain to you what was happening that day or that week that inspired that line. Like fights that I had that literally caused that line to be written, something someone said in a fight or in a moment of whatever madness that became the catalyst for this lyric.
You don't forget.
No, and actually it's a little traumatizing at times, because like now there's a lot of, obviously a lot of that violence sits really uncomfortably in my soul, like when I think about, I don't even want to think about it. I'm just saying, when I think about it, I start having like flashbacks of just like images of fucked up shit. And on the last tour I did, I really would like take time before some of the songs and explain to people, like, I don't want you to think I'm glorifying violence. I don't want you to think I'm glorifying this type of behavior. I'm singing these songs because this is what my life was. And if anything, I want you to understand that this for me is really therapy at this point. And if anything, you guys are like, this is my confession. It's not something that I'm bragging about. It's not a lifestyle that I'm trying to promote or emulate. I would tell motherfuckers on this last tour, especially before songs, I'm not trying to glorify this shit. This is what my life was. And over the years, I've come to understand that a lot of this was a reaction to the surroundings and things that had happened to me. And I'm not proud of it. And I know it was wrong. And this is something I have to deal with. And all I can do, the only thing I can do, is try to be a better person now and try to be a better person tomorrow than I was today. And I can't glorify these things, but I just want you to know, this is my confessional. This is my therapy. You're giving me a place to scream at the world about the fucked up things that I've done and the guilt that I have and the pain that I carry around. And by doing that, you're helping keep me out of prison. And, you're giving me a place to vent my own pains and experiences, and ultimately that's what I think music is. Historically, it's been a place to express your experiences, whether it's in your pain and your loves and your happiness and your joys. It's a place where you let off what's going on inside. And there's been a lot of traumatic shit that went on inside in my life. So but I'm not trying to glorify it. It is just what it is. I'm not going to get up there and sing fucking about, Fantasyland bullshit, that I would have been in a heavy metal band.
When you play, because you still play festivals and you're still on tour, and you see young people, teenagers, when you look out or when you're walking around the crowd, do you feel like these are the same kids that were at CBGBs in 84, 85, 86? Or is it a very different thing? Is it hard to relate?
I think at young people at their core, they're all pretty much the same. It's just a different time period. We didn't have things like cell phones and stuff like that. So like we didn't have the internet, we didn't have the computer, and in some ways we weren't living as fast, but in some ways they're not living as fast. But I think young people are all just looking for answers. Most of them are very they think they know everything, but they don't really know shit. Everybody's very insecure. Everybody's trying to discover who they are. And everybody makes a lot of fucking mistakes. I don't know how much has changed. I don't think about it too much. I think about my life. I think about, my wife, my kids, and you know, I'm just, like I say, I'm just grateful, man. I'm lucky I made it through all that shit. I'm lucky I'm still here. Like, you know, a lot of people, they sing songs about it, but they didn't really live it. And if they did live it, they know how lucky they were to still be here. It doesn't fall short on me ever. There's not a day that I don't wake up, even when I'm a miserable fuck, I still find a reason to be grateful, you know, even when the fucking weather sucks, even when it's cold, even when I'm, you know, whatever wrong is happening at any given moment, I still find a reason to be grateful to just be where I am and to have survived the shitstorm that was my life at so many different stages of it. You know, my childhood was fucking insane, and that was like before I was even playing music. You know, my babyhood, not even my childhood. You know, I'm lucky I made it past that shit. You know, just the situations that like my mom and all her scumbag, fucking junkie, alcoholic, fucking criminal friends put me in. I'm lucky I survived that shit. Never mind, lucky I survived punk rock and all the junkies and the scumbags and the fucking perverts and pedophiles and fuckwits, you know. Forget about the fucking, you know, all the drugs from the 80s and then all the drugs from the 90s. Oh yeah, them too. Then, you know, like, you know, I'm lucky I survived all this shit, and I'm finally at a place where I'm just like, you know, where gratitude is like, that's my mantra, man. You know, I'm just lucky motherfucker.